Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Thunderstock Show, a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. I'm your host and fractional chief marketing officer, Ross Stockdale with Thunderstock Marketing. Today, our guest is a different side of the org chart with FocusCFO. We have m.stier, and can't wait to talk about how us fractionals work together to increase profitability for clients. Michael, thanks for joining.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So, Michael, how did you get started as a fractional CFO? I'm assuming that wasn't your first gig out of college.
Oh, far from that. In fact, as you would typically expect from somebody who's a fractional CFO, my degree is in computer and systems engineering.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
exactly. So no, this is a latter chapter move for me. Prior to this, I had started and it started had to start a business, a fintech business focused on investment management, and built that from scratch, ran it, grew it, and then over the course of over 15 years, eventually had a successful exit to a strategic buyer. So this is kind of my next chapter, combination of for fun and to also pay it forward, right? And helping other smaller businesses have their optimal outcome down the road.
Wow. You're definitely the first person as a fractional CFO that started in the IT type space. So that's an interesting. What got you? What when you were growing up, like what made you decide to pursue IT
I'd say more specifically engineering. Um,
engineering?
yeah, essentially, I was one of those people that was always wired for math,
Hmm.
and so it just came easy to me. Knock on wood, and so it just seemed like a very logical thing for me to pursue, and I enjoyed that aspect of it until I was doing interviews at the end of college for what you would typically find, large companies that hire engineers. And I could not see myself being one of those engineers in a cubicle in a large farm somewhere, for an aerospace company or whatever it was. I took an on-campus interview with a consulting firm, and that resonated with me right away, and that was really kind of the start of it. And so I'm one of those extroverted people, and being out and being in the consulting world was really kind of my start for doing this.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know too many people that end up in the fractional world that don't have a tinge of extroversion in them. It's whether it's a combination of the client variety, getting to work with different businesses, or whether it's the combination of a lot of this job is communicating with clients. So um, it's cool that you figured that out about yourself and made that pivot early instead of having to spend years of your life behind a cubicle and not loving life. So
Yeah, I'm fortunate that way. And then, when I started my business and ultimately we grew it, and, had a full leadership team, I was essentially the CFO for the business.
mhm.
Now, I would never put myself out as a CFO. But quite honestly, if I knew about the industry, the fractional CFO was an option back then, I would have hired one and fired myself in an instant.
Interesting.
Right. That was one of my first lessons. I learned a lot after joining Focus CFO, and I go back and I think about my prior business, and with every business you make a bunch of mistakes and you make some smart decisions. Hopefully, the smart ones outweigh the bad ones by a couple along the way. And so that would have been one lesson learned. And then the other one is interesting because you had prior podcasts on this. We're big into EOS as well. We run EOS internally as a firm.
That was me my next question.
Yeah, we recommend it to clients. And so when I first started with Focus and I was learning about EOS again for the first time, it was funny. I was listening to the audiobook version of Traction on a trip to the beach with my wife, and I had it on the car playing. And the entire time I was mumbling to myself about, "Damn, I should have done that. That would have been great in my business. That would have been really helpful." So when I speak with clients now, I go back and relay all the dumb things that we did or all the things that we could have done better, and as examples of why this model works.
The book selection you have on the wall, first of all, I love that you have books that are the shelves holding up other books. That's probably a first for a
Yeah, the
backdrop.
floating shelves. Yeah.
The floating shelves are cool. But I did notice a few titles that were The Go Giver and Five Dysfunctions. Patrick Lencioni is part of the EOS canon required reading.
Yep.
But I also noticed, I think it's Rocket Fuel, but I can't quite read it. I can just tell by the
It is
color
rocket
scheme.
fuel behind me. Yep.
Yeah, so that was a little bit of a giveaway for EOS to me. I've probably received or given out half a dozen copies of Traction myself. So, what about EOS do you focus on when you're working as a fractional CFO with clients?
So, two aspects of this. One, internally, we as a firm started running it maybe 7 years ago, roughly
Hmm.
something like that. And if you look back, I'm sure you've seen this with the companies that you work with. All these, especially tech related companies, when they first start up, they all have these hockey stick growth forecasts that every VC will roll their eyes at.
Sure.
But if you look back at historically now with Focus CFO and our growth over the last 7, 8 years, we do have that hockey stick growth as matter of fact. And there are two aspects or two catalysts, I should say, right at that inflection point that help us grow and really propel us. And one of that was adopting EOS internally because we were very much a founder-led, founder-dependent business at that point. Yeah, and in order to be able to, it was just getting too much. And in order for the business to scale, he recognized, and we had other CFOs in our firm. We said, "Hey, Brad, we should look at EOS. This thing may be good for us." And eventually, after a couple false starts, we got it right, and it really helped propel our growth into, now we're the largest in the country doing these kind of services.
Wow. How many total CFOs are part of Focus CFO?
We're right around, excuse me.
You're good.
I hope you could edit that out. We're right about 200 CFOs at this point, maybe 250 total within the firm.
Wow.
So yeah, and when I started with them 4.5 years ago, we were in the 60s.
Oh my gosh. So you've
Yeah.
been a part of, you're not kidding when you say hockey stick growth.
Oh, it's been a fun ride.
Sheesh. So cool. Yeah, it's funny when I talk to other founders that were founder led and they were the owner operator and just kind of cowboy, swinging from the hip. And they've expressed very similar sentiments. It's like, oh, the year after we adopted EOS, we were in the Inc. 5000 list. Like, look at that. It's funny how that works. When you're approaching, so basically you're saying you practice what you preach because you've adopted internally. It makes it a heck of a lot easier to use those tools, not only for running the business inside of Focus CFO, but how does it affect your relationship with the clients? Like, do you typically work, like, do you bring in aspects of EOS or do you seek clients that use EOS, or what's that relationship like?
That's a great question. Um, we are such a fan of kind of the structure and the tools of it. We've actually adapted our client service delivery methodology to EOS. We don't necessarily call it that, but we certainly talk about it. So things like annual goals, quarterly planning sessions, rocks, whatever. We do that just so that we can be effective in delivering value to our clients. But along the way, and I always preach it anyway, they will eventually adopt either aspects of it or actually go all in on EOS along the way. And the converse is if we run into, since EOS has grown in popularity so much lately, we now run into prospects who are running EOS and they see that we know it
Hmm.
intimately. We run it ourselves. And that's almost kind of like an affinity call. It's like, oh, great. You guys are a perfect fit for us. Let's go.
I Yeah, that mirrors my exact answer to the question as well. It's an affinity call. Clients that are familiar with it or into it. It helps differentiate you as a service provider versus those that don't necessarily call it out.
Mhm.
But it also makes doing what we do as fractionals a lot easier because there's shared expectations of everyone's on the same page when it comes to rocks. Everyone's on the same page when it comes to scorecard. You know, we
Yep.
don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to use the wheel that exists and make sure we're all going in the same direction. So let me ask you another question about EOS for you personally. You said that you wish you would have done it for your own business. Um, how did you how did you approach financial leadership CFO? You weren't the official CFO, but you acted as that. And how did that approach like how did that evolve over time from what you were doing for your own business to when you jumped to Focus CFO?
So when I ran my own business, it was basically, learn by the seat of your pants, as most founders do,
Hmm.
right? And you pick it up, you leverage your, whatever your past experiences were. And I had some large organizational, leadership management experience, which helps a little bit, but also sometimes it's not a good thing when you're it's kind of a boat anchor sometimes when you're running a
Mm,
small business. So I shed that pretty quickly. But part of Focus CFO is we have over the years, we've been doing this for 25 years. So there's a lot of institutional expertise and methodology and best practices that's been developed. And we're a culture of continuous learning. So when anyone starts Focus CFO, they get literally a box full of books about things, including traction, Go Giver, blah, blah. You get all those things.
hmm.
And it helped me to, so everybody who comes into our firm learns about EOS. They read traction. They read, Walking to Destiny about exit planning and a few other things, so that we're all world knowledgeable, but we're all kind of speaking from, if not the same language, certainly the same framework
Right.
as we work into clients. And so just joining Focus was a big education for me in some of the practices that I wish I knew when I had my small business.
What was the leap like from making your exit from your small business to joining Focus? I know that typically within a career there's several key milestones or turning points that have been formative. I'm going to guess that that would be one of them. But can you tell me a little bit about the headspace and what it was like making that first leap? I always love hearing that story. And then if there's any other key milestones or achievements that are super noticeable to you that got you where you're at today, please share
Right.
those stories too.
Yeah. Another great question, and this may go into a lengthy conversation.
Great.
So I founded and ran my business, I said, for it was at least 15 years, maybe more than that. Um, and it was from the evolution of the business, it was time, right? It needed to go in a different strategic direction. The market was changing, et cetera. But I also knew that it was time for me to do something different. Right. So I had prepared for that. We literally ran a 2-year process trying to figure out what we wanted to do strategically. So I had time to plan for the fact that I was going to leave the business that I really helped start along the way. So, but even so, the day that I packed up my stuff and walked out of the office was an extremely emotional one, even though I
Mm,
prepared for it for quite a long time. I'd say not the mistake, but the piece of preparation that I did not do that I encourage all the business owners that I work with now is, whenever you're looking to sell the business, I don't care if it's in 2 years and 5 years and 10, whatever, make sure that you know what your next chapter is going to look like. Because you never want to just run, or walk away from something. You want to be walking or running to something. And that was the part that I didn't have at that time.
mm,
Quite frankly, I didn't know what I wanted to do next, other than taking some deliberate time off because I needed to decompress from all of that.
hmm.
Um, and Focus CFO found me, and we just started talking. And I explored a lot of things prior to that, and nothing seemed like the right fit. I was doing advisory boards and mentor things, and all fun but hobbyish level stuff.
Right.
The Focus CFO model just worked for me. And just to be clear, I'm not one of the fractional CFOs. I'm an area president, which means that I'm much more focused on, client relationship management, partnership, business development, all those things. What you typically find an extrovert to do, which, by
Hmm.
the way, as you generalize, most CFOs are not good at,
Right. That's
right?
usually, yeah.
So, which is, I talked about the two things, the catalysts that were in that inflection point of our growth. One was EOS, and one was recognizing that we needed to separate roles, and we
Mm,
need to have separate business development, relationship management roles from the CFOs that are just doing the outstanding week to week client service delivery. And that really then propelled us as well to do that. So for me, my prior business, I spent 15 years working with small to mid-sized private businesses in my particular industry, and help talking to them about, what's your target market niche? What's your growth strategy? How are you trying to get operational scalability in your business? In those conversations, if it worked out that they were a good fit for my business, they became clients. And if not, I would coach them in different directions. That's essentially what I do today,
Sure.
with the CFO. But it's now across every industry, not just my one vertical that I was focused on in the past. It's still very entrepreneurial, which for me, wires it, and also plays into my extrovert personality. But I don't have all of this stuff that used to keep me up at night, like
Right.
like working with VCs on my board, right? Being on a plane every other week, being
Mm,
responsible for scores of employees, right? So I'm in the best of all worlds, and I'm part of a firm that now has really, it's a purpose driven, has dual missions. One is, as I mentioned, is to help other small, mid-sized business owners just build better businesses and have a optimal outcome, whatever that means for them down the road. But two, we also provide very experienced, seasoned financial executives an opportunity for their next best chapter, where if they're done or don't want to do the full-time 80-hour-week grind, there is a tremendous amount of value that these very experienced CFOs who've been doing it for decades to now apply it toward the small business world where they never would have had that kind of experience and guidance before. So it's that pay it forward thing as well.
such an
I see
interesting
your wheels are
seat.
turning.
It's such an interesting seat to sit in because you're you're really the cog in the middle of the wheel between your clients who the pain points you expressed, working with VCs, having tremendous overhead of employees that you have to be responsible for,
Mhm,
being on the road every other week. As someone that loved my experience doing private equity as a CMO for a portfolio of
mhm,
companies, I loved a lot about my job, but the things that you mentioned were the probably the core three pain points that kept me up at night. So by being able to have that substantial impact on businesses and give other CFOs the opportunity to serve
mhm.
clients and things like that, how do you feel like those three that pain points that you shared and that I also can resonate with are those really common pain points for a lot of your clients?
Sure. At some point when they're thinking about kind of later down the road, those are clearly stressors for them. But I think the pain points in their business that make them open to having the conversation and exploring with us, or
Hmm.
being recognized by their other trusted advisors who suggest that they should speak with us. They're all pretty common. They're struggling with managing the cash flow of the business,
Right.
right? Revenue and profitability is fine, but if you don't have the cash in business, that's the lifeblood of the business. So that's usually
Yeah.
one part.
Cash flow is king.
Yeah, and most of them don't recognize that. I can't tell you how many owners I speak to, even ones with some sizable businesses, where their idea of managing cash flow is what's in my checking account on Friday afternoon, or when I have to make payroll. Yeah. So cash flow management is really important. Two is a lot of times it has to do with the growth of the business. And there's two sides of that coin. Either the business is growing fairly rapidly, they have really good growth rates, but they haven't scaled the business and its processes and its systems to match that growth. And they're still operating like they're this size when the business is now this size. And stuff is breaking all over the place, right? And then that you typically results in cash flow problems along the way as well, right? So we come in and help them not only from a financial perspective, but just general business operation. Because all of our CFOs obviously have been doing this for decades. A CFO is as operational as anybody else, and they're helping bring in that level of discipline, and forward planning and forecasting that they need to manage their business and improve their processes. The other side of that coin is perhaps the business has stalled, and the owner is a little bit struggling
Mm,
as to what do I do? Right? And so we go in there, we help diagnose the business. What clients are profitable, what's not, what product and service lines are profitable, what's not. Where's your customer concentration? Have you been pricing right? I mean, all of those kind of questions, right? You can go on and on with that. And the third most common pain point is when the owners start thinking about, all right, what's next? Like, I've
mm,
started this business. What do I do? Is this Am I going to be able to fund my retirement? Am I building a business of value? Will anybody be interested in this thing?
Right.
Do my employees want to buy it? I mean, so we get involved. I mentioned exit planning early on. That's a big part. Exit planning is actually sometimes a bad term to use,
Right.
right? It's just more about getting your business ready and attractive. If anyone ever started to come in and look at your business and you're not
Sure.
scrambling to do it the last minute, which most of the time means you fail that test.
Well, I would say 80% of owners either wait too long to sell
Yep.
or they rush too fast to sell. Whereas one of the things that it sounds like you do is you come into a business owner and you say, "Hey, where do you want to be in 5 years? Let's help you get there."
Yeah.
Because it starts now, you know?
Right. The cliche in the exit planning world is the first question is, what's the best time to start doing exit planning? Right. And
Yesterday.
the answer is the day you start your business.
Mm,
Right. What's the second best time to start? Now. Right.
right.
So yes. And because a lot of times it's a 5-year plan to get it to where you need to go, not just from a growth and profitability perspective or market expansion or whatever else kind of things you want to do, but even just structurally the business, your key leadership team. What's the tax structure of the business, right? Because sometimes you need to make those changes 5 years in advance for them to be effective. So it's across the board. And those are the kind of things that we get involved with over an extended period of time, which is why our average engagement length with clients is exceeding 6 years now.
That's impressive average engagement with clients, especially because fractional as a term has not been popularized. But
Yeah,
because Focus CFO has been around for 25, it kind of guys, you have a huge jump in the game. I did want to also mention when it comes to exit planning, some people don't even know they might know they want to sell their business, but like, does it look like an ESOP? Is it a private sale? Is it
sure.
going public? Like, how do you want to sell your business?
Right. Is it
Um,
an external exit? Is it an internal transfer? Is it going to the next generation? And there's all sorts of considerations when you even pull back those are the choices.
it's interesting when you talk about pain points as well between, you know, diametrically opposed. The business is stalled. Let's audit why. And then the other one is more money, more problems. Hey, we've grown like crazy. How do we get, make sense of this?
Mhm.
Um, do you find that by having your systematic approach with EOS, it sort of arms Focus CFO to address both of those very different problems in a similar process, or how does your
Yes.
team go about doing that?
Um, it's interesting. One could drive the other. I'll just relay a story. I had a client review session this morning with one of my CFOs and a new client. Their revenue growth was really impressive, and their forecast revenue growth was impressive, but their profitability was going down, right, from that all.
Mm-hmm.
And their liquidity issues as a result of the growth were becoming more acute. And it's because they were primarily focused on growing the top line with the assumption that just growth solves all problems. And listen, revenue growth definitely solves some problems, better than not having it.
Sure.
But right now they were like, yeah, we're losing money on every widget, but we'll make it up in volume. That old cliche. But that's
Maybe.
that's kind of that's kind of where it was. And our CFO spent the last 3 months putting together their forecast, but also the plan toward, hey, we have to hit these operating leverage metrics, profitability by plant, use of inventory, liquidity, all those things. And we need to cascade that down into the operational managers. We've done it, even though we haven't said we're implementing EOS to them yet. We're essentially putting a lot of those things in scorecards. They're having weekly management team meetings now. They're sharing the scorecards and pushing down goals to the next level of management. We're a good portion of the way there without putting a label on it yet.
You have me thinking. So what does Focus CFO is the largest CFO firm in the country,
Mhm.
but what kind of implication do you find that has on the overall explosion of the fractional industry? Like, you guys have probably been around almost the longest, if not the longest,
Yeah, 25 years.
the
Yeah.
largest. I mean, 25 years, well before COVID, talk about this dot-com bubble era.
Yeah, yeah. One of the early
So
pioneers in this space.
yeah, so like, can you speak a little bit to your thoughts on the explosion of the fractional industry and why that is, and how maybe future casting, what that's going to look like in 5 years from now?
It's another great question, and I do have this conversation a lot. So, as with everything in life, nothing's either all good or all bad. Um, and so are you there, Ross? I
Oh,
can't hear
sorry.
you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'm here. My bad. I had a dog issue. He was freaking out, so I want to make sure everything was good.
Okay. I hope you have a good editor for this.
I do.
Okay, perfect. So let's start over again. The whole explosion of fractional CFO, I'm sorry, the explosion of the fractional space. As I said, it has both good elements and bad elements to it. From a good side, we used to, before COVID, we had to do a lot of education with business owners about what does fractional mean, right? Didn't like I said, I didn't even know about it when I was running my business, and so there's more awareness now. It's not 100% by any stretch, but there's more awareness of it now, and so that's one less educational hurdle to get over. On the flip side, and which also means, by the way, that we get a lot more inbound inquiries now because of that. But on the flip side, there's no standards or anything involved in this. There is, and I'm sure you see it on the marketing side, there is a slew of, how to put it nicely, less than fully qualified people that can slap the fractional CFO or fractional CMO label on themselves, who have never been a CFO or a CMO, right? Maybe they were an SEO analyst at an agency, or, for us, maybe they were an accounting manager or controller, or just came out of a public accounting firm. But that's accounting. That's not strategic finance. And they've never been a CFO. They don't have the operational experience, like I said. And so I'm also now, there's that noise in the marketplace, and owners
Yeah.
don't know enough to sift through it all. So now it's become a different educational challenge for us. And I'm also now running more often into owners that have had past experiences with some of those knuckleheads. And now they're a little bit burned and gun shy because
Yeah.
they didn't know the difference of that. And so we're getting over that educational hurdle as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you say that, I just had a conversation with somebody 2 months ago at a lunch. He reached out, wanted to have lunch, wanted to ask me about what I'm doing. It's great. He goes, I'm thinking about being a fractional CMO. I was like, okay. My first question is, have you been a CMO not fractionally before? He goes, no, I was a brand strategist. I said, okay, well, you could be a fractional brand strategist and that wouldn't be telling any lies, right? You have a proven track record doing that. But like, here's what I do for clients. Have you ever done that? Well, no. I said, okay, my suggestion to you, selfishly, right? Don't pollute
Yeah.
the marketplace. Just don't pretend to be a role just because it's becoming popularity as, you know, um, becoming a popular term. Just be yourself. There's plenty of room out there for fractional bookkeeping services,
Yeah.
fractional controller,
Yeah.
whatever. Do
Yeah.
that. Don't necessarily, don't necessarily limit yourself to trying to be someone you're not. So it's such an interesting thing. And when I Thunderstock marketing, Focus CFO, two sides of the coin, right? I'm
Sure.
an owner operator, I'm on year three. I have a few employees, but not other, stable fractional CMOs. But what I try to tell clients right up front is here's what you're gonna get. Here's my experience, here's
Mhm.
the industries I've served, the results I've gotten. If that works for you, great. If it doesn't, hey, let me try and advise you on what would. But sharing that, my question then becomes, how do you see the relationship between a fractional CMO or a fractional CFO working together on projects and clients? And what are the key differences in your opinion?
Well, the difference between finance and marketing?
Well,
Yeah.
I know that, but I
Ah,
want I want to hear your story.
so also a great question. And we're talking about small and mid-sized businesses,
Mhm.
regardless of whether there's a fractional CMO in there first, or a fractional CFO, or a fractional CRO, head of sales or whatever, we're all going to find gaps and deficiencies in that business in other areas. And from our vantage points, we get to see a lot of that, certainly from the financial side. So we get in and we're looking at it and we're trying to do forecast growth and sales and the resulting financials behind that. And you go, all right, well, what's the sales forecast? What's the process? What's the sales system? Right. And we're not trying to be sales consultants. We're just trying to understand so we can build good forecasts and do great strategic planning. And you kind of get that deer in the headlight look. And I'm like, all right, well, there's a need here, right, on the rev ops or the demand generation side of things. And so we'll identify needs. And so I think we always find opportunities to bring in or make referrals into other professionals, right? Other really good practicing fractionals or just supporting organizations. I mean, you mentioned outsourced bookkeeping. We bring that in a lot to our clients.
Sure.
Because
you're CFOs, you're not a totally different role, but some clients don't know the difference.
Yeah, we're not going to do their bookkeeping.
No.
Right. Just like you're not going to be writing articles for them, right?
No, I'm not the right person to write articles, but I do have people that are.
Exactly. It's the same thing, right? By the way, I'm laughing because I actually ran into an outsourced bookkeeping firm, and I won't mention where they are, who literally called themselves fractional CFOs. If they were close by, I would have strangled them. I mean, you guys are killing me here. But anyway, getting back to your point, so our role, and primarily my role, is being that massive connector for our clients, because they have needs. They have lots of different needs along the way, and they may not need a fractional CRO for the next 5 years, but they may need one for the next 12 months to help them put together
a playbook or a team,
playbook, and build a team. Right, exactly. One thing. Same thing on the marketing side. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of synergy and opportunities for collaboration among us fractionals and others.
And others, not just marketing and finance. One thing that I found very interesting is that sometimes I'll join a client engagement, perfect example, and the goal was, hey, our last VP of sales and marketing is gone. We need to replace them. We don't really know what's going on with marketing and sales. We need, the systems, processes, the team, all the things. And we started getting to a point where the marketing engine was humming. We're setting scorecards and goals that we're hitting, but a lot of the growth stall was from I only learned months and months into the engagement was from finance. So my next suggestion is, hey, you want me to do a profitability analysis, and you want me to do a forecast on return on investment for certain new initiatives. I said, I'll tell you what, I would love those things to happen too, but asking me is probably not the best, probably not the best person to ask. So I do find quite often that when you're growing, marketing and sales are great for, helping your top line and for making sure your salespeople are busy. But when it comes to growing profitably, if you don't already have someone that's in charge of finance, and I'm not saying accounting, like every business after $1 million should have someone in charge of accounting.
Sure.
But when you have aggressive growth goals and you want to, you get to a certain size, if you don't have someone in charge of finance, the marketing function, I don't want to say gets diminished, but becomes, instead of doing the next new ad campaign, maybe we bring in the next fractional CFO. I found that several times.
I couldn't agree more. I appreciate you saying that, because I mean, how do you determine what you're doing is actually driving something that's profitable, right? You can hit some metrics on, hey, we brought in some new business, or we got these new, lead gen's been up, or whatever the metrics are. But how do you know it's profitable business, right? And what does profitable business mean? Are we bringing the wrong size clients, or are we marketing the wrong products or services because those particular ones are not profitable, or very little, or marginally profitable? So there's a lot that you need to know. So that collaboration with a strategic minded CFO and head of sales, head of marketing, whatever, these are important relationships.
I'm very biased towards wanting to work together with fractional CFOs, partially because my background in PE, the majority of other members in the firm were practicing um, fractional CFOs. That was one of the sister companies that part of the portfolio. And because I got to work with fractional CFOs for 80 hours a week, I realized how much easier and better it made my job, knowing that,
Mhm.
hey, I can commit to these decisions because there's supporting evidence and there's great logic and reasoning behind it.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that I'm, ever going to be a CFO, but it does mean that I've learned a few things that can translate to marketing. What are some things that Focus CFO has learned or focuses on for your own marketing?
Huh. That's a really interesting question. So here's a little tidbit that I didn't share with you prior. So I told you I've been with the firm for 4.5 years. 3 years ago, they asked me to join the leadership team, and I was the internal fractional CMO for the firm for the last
Okay.
3 years.
Okay.
So, and we learned and we accomplished a lot, right, in doing that. So I would say prior to that, we really didn't have much of a marketing effort, platform, et cetera. And I'm happy to say 3 years later, we have a pretty substantial one. In fact, I just stepped down and hired my full-time replacement
Oh,
from
wow.
that because we grew that much and we needed somebody, a full-time CMO in there now. Um, but things like, marketing and sales funnels didn't exist before, right? What are our target audiences that we really want to focus on, and communicate to intentionally? How do we, what are the metrics that are useful for a successful, what makes marketing successful or not, right?
Right.
Those are the kind of things. And being in a firm with CFOs, you need to get that pretty tight.
So it's focusing on what are similar to just overall business profitability, but really drilling down to what are your key performance indicators, lagging indicators, and you know, having
100%.
having a scorecard in play and then making sure that it's tracked and being executed on. I mean, yeah, it's a great universal business concept. Thank you to Gino Wickman, but it doesn't matter if it's finance or marketing. You need to have it. So
100%. And we used to have some debates about what are the important metrics do we really need on our scorecard that we were looking at every week. And I'll tell you, we went through a lot of revisions and I pushed back on a lot of stuff that I thought was noise, especially when it had related to marketing, that we needed to retune. And so it was all around, instilling the discipline of what is a funnel, what are the different layers of the funnel, and what are the key metrics of how things flow through that. That's how we measure ourselves.
no, I love that. So asking
Going
a
in, going in
30,000,
directions you didn't think, huh?
no, it's great. Going towards a 30,000 foot view, not in the tactical part of business,
Mhm.
but if you could look back on what you've learned so far and talk to yourself when you were in grade school, 8 years old, and you could give yourself advice, knowing what you know now, what type of advice and insights would you say to that person?
Um, take advice
Mm,
is my primary one. I look back at myself and maybe it was the nature because, as I mentioned early on, math in school was always interesting to me. I mean, always easy for me, right? I didn't have to go seek advice. I didn't have to go get a tutor. I didn't have to ask somebody for help. I was always kind of self-sufficient, which is great up to a certain point. But when you're starting to lead people, when you're starting to lead an organization, you can't know everything.
mhm.
And that was kind of a hard learned lesson for me, right? Like I said, I would have loved to have a fractional CFO. I would have loved to know about EOS, right? I would have loved to know about peer coaching organizations for CEOs. I mean, all those kind of things to really learn best practices from others. I think that's probably the biggest advice I would give my younger self.
That's great advice. Just, hey, take advice. Here's my advice. Take
Take
advice.
advice. Yeah.
You don't know everything.
Yeah.
And you don't need to
There's
know
a lot of smart
everything.
people out there. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to know everything. That's
Yeah.
the beautiful part. Well, awesome. At least, you know, I can say after talking with you that I know more than I knew beforehand. And I think that if that everyone had that KPI as their goal is like, hey,
Sure.
do you know more today or this week or this quarter than you did last time? Great. Because if the answer is no, change your behavior.
Right. Exactly. So today was a good day. We learned things together.
Yeah, we learn things together. For everyone listening, I just want to ask one more question from Michael. Michael, how can people find you and get in touch and learn more?
So overall, I mean, to get in touch with Focus CFO, it's that simple. FocusCFO.com
Mhm.
is our website. My name is Michael Stier, STIR. I'm on LinkedIn. I have, my bio page is up in our website. I'm very easy to find. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So I welcome, if anyone's just interested in exploring what the hell fractional CFO services are all about, whether you're a business owner or potentially thinking about becoming a fractional CFO, we'd love to talk to you about it.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you so much for your time. That concludes today's episode of the Thunderstock Show with Michael Stier, Focus CFO. I hope that you learned some valuable tidbits from this conversation. As always, I don't run ads in the show, so my only ask is that you share the show with someone if you think that they'll benefit. It's the only way
Mhm.
it grows. And the only other ask I have is to have a wonderful day today and be well. Thanks so
And
much,
learn
everyone, for
something.
tuning in and learn something. Yes, sir.